Welcome to NHPR's U.S. Senate debate. I'm Josh Rogers, senior political reporter for NHPR, joined today by Amanda Goki of New Hampshire Bulletin. These debates are produced in collaboration with the Bulletin and New Hampshire PBS. We're joined today by incumbent Democratic Senator Maggie Hassan and her challenger, Republican Don Bolduc. Welcome to you both.
Great to be here. Thank you.
As you can divine, we do have a live audience here at NHPR. A bit about our format. Each candidate will have 60 seconds for an opening statement. We'll then move to questions. Candidates will have a minute to respond. Amanda and I may follow up or seek clarity. Candidates will get 30 seconds on those, and in the case of a direct attack, we'll be allowing candidates 30 seconds to respond. We've relied on the public's feedback in selecting today's topics and thank everyone who supplied input. We'll get started with opening statements. We did have a coin flip. General Bolduc, you're up first.
I'm up first.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Well, thank you all for being here. It's my honor to be here. It's my honor to have the opportunity to represent Granite Staters in Washington, D.C., and that's what I'll do. I'll represent you. I've been campaigning for 2 years now, and I have been to every town and city in the state, and Granite Staters are hurting. They're making choices between heating and eating. Retirees are going back to work. Interest rates have doubled. What does that mean? That means that a $5,000 home 2 years ago, the mortgage would be $1,700. Today, that mortgage is now $2,700. Everything has doubled. Oil, gas, food, everything. And it's her fault. Her votes have driven this. And that's the problem we have. Career politicians who focus on special interests and lobbyists and wealthy political elite. That must change. You need an outsider in Washington, D.C., and that is Don Bolduc. Thank you.
Thank you, General. Senator.
Well, I want to thank you, Josh and Amanda, for moderating, and to NHPR and PBS and New Hampshire Bulletin for sponsoring today, to Don Bolduc for participating, and for everybody who's here and tuning in. Thanks for being part of this today. Every day, Granite Staters put aside their differences and work together to solve problems, and that is the approach that I've worked to follow in the United States Senate. I've worked across the aisle to expand high-speed internet to every community, to fix roads and bridges, to boost manufacturing, and to make sure that our veterans get the care and support that they have earned and deserve. I've also stood up to big oil and big pharma to take the steps necessary to begin lowering costs. I have a record of delivering for the people of New Hampshire, and I am proud to have been named the most bipartisan senator in the country. There's more work to do to build an economy that works for everyone. My focus will always be on listening to people in New Hampshire and delivering for the Granite State. Thank you.
We're now going to turn to some economic issues. Amanda has some questions.
So we're going to start with you, Senator Hassan. Many economists say increased government spending, much of which has been championed by Democrats, contributed to inflation over the past 2 years. You've said the Biden administration was slow to respond. And so why should voters trust Democrats, including you, to address this in the coming year? 60 seconds.
So thanks for the question. So taking a step back, inflation is a global phenomenon, and most experts say that the labor shortage and the supply chain disruptions that are driving it are caused primarily by the pandemic and the war. So it's absolutely essential we do what we can right now to lower people's costs while also dealing with the long-term drivers of inflation. So that's why I passed a new law with other senators to allow Medicare to negotiate the cost of prescription drugs. We are already seeing that law go into effect. That helps people lower their costs right now. When it comes to energy costs, that's why I've pushed the Biden administration to release more home heating fuel right now from its reserves so that we can increase supply. We also came together and I led a bipartisan push to increase home heating assistance because right now these immediate costs are really hurting people. I also support suspending the gas tax, obviously. These are all things that Don Bolduc opposes. There's more to talk about with the CHIPS and Science Act and the bipartisan infrastructure bill and how they'll help us lower costs too.
So I want to talk, a significant amount of government money went through the Paycheck Protection Program, but there was plenty of PPP fraud, with some estimates that as much as 10 to 15% of the funds, or $80 billion, were stolen. Is there a role for Congress to investigate this fraud? 30 seconds.
Yes, there is. Now, I have talked with businesses all across New Hampshire who have told me that the PPP program was a lifeline for them. A small business owner this morning, just for example. So it was really important to keep businesses open. I also worked to make sure that businesses got a tax credit for keeping their employees on board during that time. But we also included in that law critical oversight mechanisms, and we need to prosecute people who defrauded the government to the full extent of the law.
Energy prices are a major concern. You support suspending the federal gas tax, but there's no guarantee that that would result in savings for people at the pump. How would a gas tax holiday really help consumers?
Well, it would put more money in their pockets. Look, Shell Oil announced today that they made $9.5 billion in profits, the second highest profits that they have ever had. They are raking up profits along with other big oil companies while also jacking prices up at the pump. They are exploiting a war and a pandemic at the expense of Granite Staters. And here's the thing, my opponent stands right with big oil, says he would have opposed the new law we passed that will lower energy costs and help us pivot to a clean energy economy so there's finally competition for big oil, a law that would give people tax breaks for making energy efficient investments in their homes right now. Don Bolduc opposes that too. He has been standing with big oil rather than demanding that they increase the capacity that they have right now, thousands of untapped but permitted wells, and they could help lower costs.
We'll let General Bolduc respond in a second, but why haven't you been more successful? I mean, you've been talking about this gas tax holiday for a long time. It clearly hasn't picked up enough traction to become reality. Why?
Mitch McConnell blocked it on the Senate floor. We brought it to the Senate floor, and Mitch McConnell blocked it at about the same time that Republicans in New Hampshire blocked the suspension of the state gas tax.
Okay.
General Bolduc, we want to turn to you now. You have been criticizing your opponent on the issue of inflation, but the U.S. is not the only country experiencing this. Inflation is up on every continent, double digits in many places. So given this, how is it accurate to lay all of the blame on Democrats in Congress? 60 seconds.
I don't lay all the blame on Democrats. I say this is a Republican and a Democrat problem, which my opponent refuses to recognize. I'm going down there to represent Granite Staters who are hurting. And they're hurting because both parties are extreme. Both parties can't come together for the economy, out of control spending, and the safety and security of this nation. And most importantly, the people here. So, let's be clear here. Let's make sure my words are understood. I mean, she's just thrown out several accusations that are all lies, right? I have never been a politician. She's ineffective. That's why we have these problems. She has not done the right thing for spending $5.2 trillion more dollars from March to August. This Medicare thing she talks about, that's great, but it doesn't go into effect until 2026. And it lowered prices for insulin, which was great, but it took out Alzheimer's medication. How is that helping our elderly? It's not. It's double talk by career politicians who follow special interests, lobbyists, and wealthy political elite. And that's who they follow. They don't work for Granite Staters. They don't work for you. Check your electric bill.
Let's talk a little bit about what you would do to address that issue. On your website, you say we must reverse the growth of federal spending to reduce inflation. Since you can't claw back the money that's already out the door, what future spending would you cut to address inflation? 30 seconds.
Well, the first thing I would have done is voted for the bill that was put on the Senate floor in August that she voted against, and that was to stop any additional spending until we got inflation under control. She voted no for that, okay? She talks about all these things about Don Bolduc. Well, Don Bolduc isn't in the Senate yet. Don Bolduc will stop this spending, and I will work on common sense measures that help Granite Staters pay the bills, drive down gas prices, down food prices. She says she's been out talking to Granite Staters. She hasn't been out talking to Granite Staters. She's been hiding from Granite Staters.
How specifically would you drive down? Would you drive down inflation?
How specifically?
Yeah, how specifically?
I would change all the energy policies that she has agreed with Biden. XO pipeline, more drilling, more permits, more leases. This doesn't empower the petroleum industry. It drops prices for you. It makes life affordable for you. She's got it all confused. Her policies hurt people. My policies will reverse all of this and allow that inflation to come down.
But where would you cut spending? I mean, that's the other part of this.
Okay, how about $6 million going to New York to build golf courses? How about $465,000 going to teach pigeons how to play slot machines? How about $7 million going to California to build parks? How about multi-millions of dollars going to Tunisia and Pakistan to study gender transition? That's their issue. That's not our issue. That's not your issue. How about looking at all this pork that she adds to bills in order to be able to drive us into bankruptcy? How about putting a limit on the Fed and printing money that we don't have? Constantly putting us in more and more debt. $5.2 trillion. You know what that did? Bottom line, that took $2 trillion out of people's retirement savings. $2 trillion. Think about that. Think about where your retirement savings are right now. The 401ks are now 301ks. 35% reduction in savings. The military is now on 401k retirement plans. And I hope we can get into talking about veterans because she pats herself on the back, and there's a lot to unravel.
We're going to be
there.
talking about a lot of things, and right now we're going to move to another question for you, General Bolduc, regarding abortion. You say you oppose a federal abortion ban at a federal level. You said that consistently since the primary. But in Portsmouth recently, you said, quote, these other things, we've got to look into them. You were fielding a question related to in vitro fertilization. What other things were you referring to?
Well, I have no idea because I don't have reference to that. But bottom line is, and ma'am, I wish you would please listen to me because I can read your mask. I do not support a federal ban, either for or against abortion at the federal level. It is now a state issue, which she does not understand. I support New Hampshire's law. I support Granite Staters. She lies. I've told her this personally in several venues, and she continues to lie. Her commercials are hurtful. Her commercial about me wanting to murder mothers is disgraceful. It's disgraceful, and it brought my 8-year-old granddaughter to tears. I have worked my entire life to protect men and women and children, my entire life, and I will never, ever put anyone's life in jeopardy. These accusations are hurtful. She talks about working with people. She talks about wanting to get out there on the ground. Well, I've been out there on the ground. I know what these ads do. I know what these lies do. Lying about Social Security, lying about everything.
We're talking about abortion right now. We're going to move to Senator Hassan in a moment. I've got one.
No ban. Support the state law. I will always do that.
So no role for the federal government on any issue touching.
No. And I've told Mitch McConnell and I've told Lindsey Graham.
Okay, Senator, you argue abortion should be a private decision between a woman and her doctor. Do you see any role for the federal government to play in regulating abortion, or should this be a state matter?
Let's just take a step back for a minute because there's been a lot said over the last couple of minutes about a huge number of issues. But let me talk about abortion, and then I hope to have the opportunity to talk about a couple of the other things that Don Bolduc is frankly misleading people about. This is about a woman's fundamental freedom, her health, and her safety. And Don Bolduc has a very long record of extremism here. He said on the campaign trail that he would never vote against anti-choice legislation in the United States Senate. That means he is a yes vote for a national abortion ban. And people can go to bolducfacts.com and see the videos of Don Bolduc saying these things. He said that we should rejoice when Dobbs overturned Roe v. Wade. The women of New Hampshire are not rejoicing. And when we have pushed him on this, first he told the women of New Hampshire to get over it. Then he said that gentlemen in the state legislature should make these decisions for us. The problem with politicians like Don Bolduc drawing arbitrary lines, I'm getting to your question for just a second, arbitrary lines in terms of these decisions is that they can, in fact, harm women and cost them their lives in some cases.
But so do you believe, though, that the government should play any role in the regulation of abortion, period?
I believe that when the government tries to do that, it can cost women their lives, as we have seen in some states. And I think it is very, very concerning that people don't trust women and their doctors to make these very complex and often tragic decisions together.
But you were one of the sponsors of the Women's Health Protection Act, which leaves the door open for states to limit abortion after viability. So you see that as something that states should be able to do?
I am a sponsor of that law. I support that law. It would be my preference that neither legislators in the United States Senate nor in state legislatures substitute their judgment in complex, difficult decisions for women and their doctors. I also think it's really important that we allow doctors to do their jobs without fear of criminal prosecution.
All right, we're going to move on, Amanda.
Thanks, Josh. Let's turn to climate, something we've heard from a lot of voters about. Senator Hassan, the Inflation Reduction Act was the federal government's biggest piece of climate legislation to date. What do you believe needs to be done next to address climate change? 60 seconds.
Well, the new law that we passed will help in the short term lower home energy costs by giving people a tax cut for investing in home energy efficiency. It also has a lot of provisions, as you know, to promote investment into a clean energy economy so we can finally see competition to big oil and we can pivot to a clean energy economy. And since climate change is a huge issue, I hear about it from small businesses on the seacoast seeing increased sea level rise and facing flooding. I see it and hear about it from the travel and tourism industry here in New Hampshire and from homeowners. So it's really important that these measures are estimated to result in about a 40% reduction in carbon emissions by 2030. There are also, by the way, resources available to people right now to invest in weatherization in their home, to get assistance for weatherization in their homes as we're facing high heating costs, high energy costs, and trying to deal with climate change all at once. There are a number of next steps, but I think the most important thing is we've taken this major step. We're seeing investment already coming into the clean energy sector, and American innovation can now really be tapped to tackle this major problem.
So Democrats and Republicans don't typically see eye to eye on climate. What does bipartisan climate policy look like, and how would you personally go about bridging that gap?
Yeah. Well, so I just talked about one of the bipartisan measures that made it into this new law. It's something I worked on with Senator Collins in Maine. It's the measure that I talked about that gives people a tax credit if they invest in home energy efficiency. You know that Senator Shaheen and Senator Portman have long worked on bipartisan energy efficiency measures because we know the lack of energy efficiency in much of our built infrastructure is one of the major contributions to carbon emissions. So that's another example of the kind of work we have been able to do across the aisle. And Senator Portman and Senator Shaheen were successful in including that measure too.
Thank you. Now to you, General Bolduc.
Yes, ma'am.
You've said you're concerned about the environment and that American businesses should be held accountable for air and water pollution. Do you believe the government should establish binding targets when it comes to reducing emissions?
I think the federal government involved in this business is a complete waste of money and a waste of time. I think the state government should do it. I think our state legislatures and our governors will take care of our environment really well. And I think that the EPA at the federal level has established standards that the state doesn't agree with for our water. 70 parts per million versus 13 to 15 parts per million, right? The federal, what she talks about, I support anything to help the environment. I think it's great. I'm all over that. But what they're not doing, and everything that they are doing with the Green New Deal, is hurting Granite Staters. They're taking away fossil fuel, which they need in order to be able to make renewable energy. They're costing you way more money. This is the deal. The deal is you pay for something, they charge you for it. There's no goodness in that for you. And how about China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, the biggest polluters in the world? She's got nothing to say about that. They're the biggest polluters in the world. America does a great job and will continue to do a great job for our environment and our climate. And I will be a champion for that. But she doesn't hold any of the other countries that are polluting. While Russia is not held accountable, she's holding American businesses accountable and running them out of business. That's
How
wrong.
would you hold Russia and other polluting countries accountable?
Well, I would demand the same kind of international agreements that we are bound by. I mean, come on, they dump plastic and all kinds of pollutants in our oceans every single day without any accountability from our U.S. Senate. They don't hold anyone accountable. They haven't. They didn't hold them accountable for Afghanistan. Look what's going on there. Ukraine, look what's going on there. You know, war is one of the biggest environmental polluters. I know that. I will work to keep us out of war. China, look what they're doing in Asia. They're polluting Asia all over the place inside the South China Sea and everything. We're not doing anything about that.
General, I wanted to ask you.
That's the problem.
We're going
Bunch
to
of
get to
political
foreign
double talk up here to make you feel good, but the bottom line is we're not holding the people accountable that we need to hold accountable, and we're blaming ourselves and making you pay for it.
We're going to get
It's
to
wrong.
foreign things in a moment. One more question on the
wanna-
environment to you, General, from Amanda.
You call for energy independence. So beyond drilling, how would you accomplish that?
How would I accomplish energy independence?
Correct.
The XL pipeline, the expansion of.
But beyond drilling, what other, or do you think that drilling is sufficient?
Well, I think exploration is sufficient. I think that the drilling, everything that they reversed that put us in this spot is what needs to be addressed because it has got us here, and they reinforce failure every day. I don't know how she can look Granite Staters in the eyes knowing that they're making a choice between heating and eating. I've been out there holding the hands of moms and dads and retirees who can't afford to live right now. A family who was moved out of their home because they can't afford their home into a 3-room apartment with their 3 children.
Okay, we've got to.
This is disgraceful. It's wrong. It's her fault.
All right, we're going to move on to foreign policy. General, you've criticized U.S. foreign policy for being too reactive under Joe Biden. What are some specific examples of what you think the country should be doing differently?
Well, first of all, we can't do anything when we're economically weak. Listen, military strategy, policy, national security is based off of strong diplomacy. We are not respected in the world, largely because of decisions made by the Biden administration with the withdrawal from Afghanistan and doing nothing and sitting back and watching Russia invade Ukraine, and then do nothing in the times of lull to bring people to the diplomatic table. Our politics is weak because our economy is weak, because we have policies that weaken that. And that's the Democrats' fault. That's her fault. That's the administration's fault. You can't have a strong military. Our military is rated as weak now, a downgrade from marginal. Our informational policy, people don't trust us when we talk anymore because of what we did in Afghanistan. They don't believe us. Our values and principles have been undermined. And they've been undermined by her and the Democratic Party and some Republicans. And it's unfortunate. And we need a change.
So, General, you mentioned Ukraine a moment ago, and over the course of over the course of recent months, you said a number of things regarding the Russian invasion of Ukraine. You voiced support for putting boots on the ground in the form of the CIA. In April, you said President Zelensky needed material support. You also said last month that funding should be cut because the U.S. has no mission there. So, kind of, which is it? What should the U.S. do now?
Originally, we should have thrown every deterrent at them that we could have originally, months before, but we didn't do it. So then we needed to do that. And then we were stuck. So what are we going to do? We're going to build up the resistance. We did that. And then, before we even finished the first package of relief, she approved another $40 billion. I wouldn't have done that. I would have required transparency to the American people on why we're going to add another $40 billion. And then another $40 billion. And instead of bringing Putin to the table when there was a lull in fighting, they just watched him do it. And then he comes back. And he comes back with missiles and, killing women and children. Their fault. They did nothing because our diplomacy and our politics are weak. Our military.
Well, what should we do now,
answer.
though? What should we do now?
What should we do now? Well, it's simple, right? We should be turning off Putin's ability to get any energy, shutting that off. That's his lifeline. That's the center of gravity for him. And if we cut that off, the Russian people in the Politburo will say enough is enough and will bring him to the table. That's what we have to do. Sending the 101st Airborne Division over there and putting him in Romania, one step away from conventional boots on the ground, when we have an administration that can't even do a withdrawal properly, we want them to get into a conventional war in Ukraine against Russia? Is that what you want? Because that's exactly what's going to happen under her. What has she said about that? Zip. Nothing. She's been absent. You want me to have all the solutions, and I have solutions for military strategy and policy.
How would you?
She's there doing nothing.
We're going to get to her in a second. But what would you do if Putin used a tactical nuclear weapon in Ukraine? How should the U.S. respond in that circumstance?
If he uses a tactical nuclear weapon, then he has probably, first of all, he's going to threaten that. It's on the table, right? Mutual assured destruction on the table. China is pulling the strings here, and China wants to lead the world. And they're well on their way to doing it because we've weakened ourselves so much, economically, politically, diplomatically, militarily. We've let them into every one of our institutions. We're allowing them to buy farmland right up next to our strategic bases. This is unbelievable.
Okay, I want to talk
all under her. No. You asked me the question.
Okay, well, what to do about a nuclear if he's...
So you got to put pressure on China because China's pulling the strings. China does not want to inherit a post-nuclear world. And so they will keep him in check. But we have to do it too. In sitting back saying, well, it's up to Putin. That's their strategy. Okay. That's what the Democrats do. Oh, it's up to Putin. Well, right. No, it's up to us to lead. And we're not leading because we're weak.
Okay, Senator, what do you say to that critique?
Look, there are a lot of things that have been said over the last multiple minutes on a bunch of different issues. Let me just start by saying that when Don Bolduc was talking about energy several minutes ago, he was apologizing yet again for big oil and singing their song. Let me also just say that he has consistently stood with big oil and did not give you, Amanda, a straight answer because, of course, big oil could be increasing their capacity and lowering prices at the pump right now, and they are choosing not to. And that's why I've called for an investigation to investigate their price gouging and manipulation. Don Bolduc makes excuses for a lot of big corporate special interests, big pharma being the other one.
I do want to get to Ukraine.
I want to get to that too. But I also really do need to be able to have the opportunity to correct the record and let people understand how extreme and how aligned with big corporate interests my opponent is. Now, on to Ukraine.
Let me just ask you a question.
Yeah.
I mean, you voted for billions of dollars of military aid. What do you make of U.S. strategy there? Should there be a clear limit on this country's support in Ukraine?
So the Ukrainian people are giving their lives for what we have, democracy. They are demonstrating at enormous personal risk and with enormous bravery and courage that democracies are worth fighting for. Vladimir Putin is a war criminal. He has to be held accountable. There has been bipartisan support for making sure that we follow a strategy that does two things. We make sure that Ukraine has the resources, both in terms of weapon, expertise, training, and finances, to work to repel Vladimir Putin and stand up for their democracy. We also have a strategy of imposing significant sanctions on Putin that have had serious effect and have crippled his ability to prosecute what is an unconscionable war. At the end of the day, we have to be able to assess facts on the ground and make decisions about next steps accordingly with our allies. One of the things that we have done successfully is build a strong alliance. It is absolutely critical we have partners in the region so that we can let Vladimir, not only Putin, but the other world's autocrats, China, Iran, and North Korea, see that we will fight for democracy so that democracies can survive.
Well, should the U.S. encourage Ukraine to give up territory to secure peace?
The Ukrainian people have a right to self-determination, and that is their decision to make. We should do everything we can to foster diplomacy at the Ukrainian people's request. It's obviously important that we reach peace, that Ukraine reaches peace as soon as it can, because nobody likes war. But we do also have to support a democracy that is struggling to repel a war criminal. And I am proud of the fact that there has been bipartisan consensus in the Senate and in Congress to make sure that we are standing with people who are standing for freedom and repelling Putin before his aggression can move further.
Okay, we're going to move on now.
Yeah.
We're going to talk a little bit now about immigration. Senator Hassan, you've supported a Trump-era policy called Title 42 that lets the federal government turn away asylum seekers at the border. That public health measure is meant to stop the spread of infectious disease, but we're now at a different stage in the pandemic. Is this still an appropriate way to address the issue?
Well, what I have said, because the first job of government is to keep its people safe, and that starts, among other things, with a safe, secure, and orderly border so that we can also have a country that enforces the rule of law and lives up to our values, that the Biden administration should not prematurely lift Title 42. There's consensus that when Title 42 is lifted, there will be a surge of migration. We have to make sure that we can keep people from crossing the border illegally and that we can fight drug and human trafficking, right? So knowing, and there's really bipartisan consensus that when Title 42 is lifted, there will be a surge of migration. We have to know that we have the security resources at the border to deal with that surge. I have traveled multiple times to the border, talking with frontline personnel, and they don't have the resources they need to have the kind of operational security that would be required. So they need more personnel, they need more technology, and in some cases they need more physical barriers. And that's why I have pushed back hard against the administration's plan to lift this Title 42 prematurely, because security has to be our priority.
So immigrant rights activists in New Hampshire say this policy is racist. Are they wrong?
We have to have a secure border so that we can run an asylum adjudication system that honors our values. But the first job of government is to keep people safe, and right now we don't have enough Custom Border Patrol agents at the border. I have voted to provide significantly more there. We don't have enough technology, not only to detect human smuggling, but also to detect drug smuggling, especially fentanyl and the new synthetic opioids. We have some new technology that does that, but not enough. And in some cases, there are gaps in physical barriers that should be closed so that we can give our frontline personnel what they need.
Okay, thank you. I want to turn to General Bolduc now. You call for securing the borders and adding more border agents, but employers around the country are struggling to fill vacancies, including industries that rely on migrant workers. What changes in immigration policy would you support to address this problem?
Well, first of all, I would immediately want to enforce our legal immigration, right? Which we're not doing right now, thanks to the Democratic Party and the policies of Joe Biden. She just talked about Title 42. Well, she just voted to lift it on the Senate floor. So she don't want to keep it in place. She just voted to lift it. It's a matter of record on the Senate floor. So what are we talking about there? She voted against everything President Trump wanted to do to secure the border.
I want to hear about what you would do in terms of
What do you mean what I would do? I'm telling you what I would do. I would secure the border. I would secure it. 87,000 IRS agents? No way. 80 billion to fund that? No way. Needs to go to the Border Patrol. She voted for 600 agents. They're at 19,000. They need 25,000. They don't have the equipment they need. They're trying to manage a border. They're hurting the northern border and every other port of entry with their policies. They're weakening us all across this country. 5 million people have come to this country, and they've come through unlawfully, and they haven't been adjudicated right, and they've been dumped on our communities, costing us billions of dollars. Crime, opioid crisis, all these things. You have to secure the border, and you have to do it with a good, strong border patrol, and you have to do it with good immigration law. And the signal that's being sent is causing all kinds of people. She said she cares about women and children. Do you know the trek they have to take? Murder, rape. Do you know that is inhumane? I know that. I worked on borders. I've seen it. I've held babies. I've held mothers. I've held people that have been assaulted. I have seen it personally. I know what these policies have given us.
But so
And
you
this,
think
this isn't American values. This is the exact opposite of American values. And it needs to stop.
But do you think sealing the border
Visiting
more
the border
effectively
is
with
a
general?
whole heck of a lot different than working on borders.
But do you think sealing the border more effectively will deter people from making that track you described?
There's two messages here, and it's all informational. We have a legal immigration system, not open immigration system. And we have a border that will be sealed, and you will remain in Mexico. And that did work under the last administration because we got other countries involved. Now it's willy-nilly, throw everybody at our southern border coming north from all kinds of countries. Never mind how many terrorists are here. Look how she's empowered the cartel with opioids and human trafficking and weapons trafficking.
We're running
Look
up
at what's
against our-
going up here. Look what's going on here in this state.
We're gonna
200% increase in the opioid crisis.
We can revisit some of these things. We're going to take a break
Sure.
right now.
Got
We'll
it.
stick around for NHPR's candidate debate. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back. Thank you.
The New Hampshire candidate.
Our senior political reporter. With me is Amanda Goki of New Hampshire Bulletin. We'll continue now with a discussion on voting and elections. General, this week, earlier, a couple of days ago, yesterday, I think, you said you'd accept the results of next month's vote, regardless of how it went for you. But last week, referring to the 2020 election, you said, quote, "I still believe there were irregularities and fraud, and I believe that can be proven even in this state." Mm-hmm. There is no evidence of widespread fraud in New Hampshire. The governor and the secretary of state both say New Hampshire elections are secure and not compromised by fraud. Do you believe they're wrong? 60 seconds.
Well, I believe Granite Staters, right? And I'm the only one sitting here that's been to every town and city in this state over 2 years. And I believe Granite Staters when they say they don't like the fact that college students that aren't residents here can vote. They don't like the fact that they can't trust the mail-in ballot system. They don't like the fact that there was proven irregularities with voting machines that haven't been certified in 20 years. They don't like the fact that same-day voter registration causes fraud. If Granite Staters don't like it, then we need to take a look at it. But what she believes in is federalizing the process. I don't believe in that at all. More big government. That's all she's been talking about. Big government. Not only does she believe in federalizing that, but she wants to take away our electoral college. That would hurt New Hampshire. She voted for that in SB 1. She can't hide from that. That's her vote. And that would also take first in the state primary away. Something that brings about $4 billion every 4 years to the people of New Hampshire.
We're going to get to some of that
this
in
is
a moment.
Huge.
We're going to get to some of that in a moment,
So this
General.
is huge. So I listen to Granite Staters. I don't want the federal government in your business.
All right. We're going to get to that. I do have a follow-up, though. You mentioned you want to eliminate same-day voter registration in New Hampshire.
No, I want the state to look at it.
Okay, well, this is what you said yesterday.
Yeah.
Okay.
I want the state to look at it.
Okay,
I want our state legislators and governors to look at it because the Heritage Foundation found that we ranked 21 in voter integrity.
All right, let me just get to the
50.
question here, though. The question is that if you eliminate that, then New Hampshire would need to follow so-called motor voter requirements federally, which would essentially have voters register anytime they got a driver's license. Is that something that you favor?
No, you can balance that. And again, the federal government needs to stay out of elections at the state level. And these are all laws that have to be relooked.
But that's what same-day registration does for New Hampshire. We're one of the small states that got waivers from.
Well, then we need to make sure that school buses loaded with people at the polls don't come in and vote. And we need to make sure that the 10,000 people that show up on same day without an ID card actually come back and prove. 10,000 people, less than 400 came back. You can laugh about it, but people in New Hampshire aren't laughing about it. This is a fundamental freedom that I was sent to other countries to make sure happened. And you know what? The Congress has rules when we help other countries. They have to have an ID. They have to prove where they live inside that country. They can't do it same day. This is all rules that we apply to other countries.
Okay, Joe, we're going to move to the
You can shake your
center,
heads all you want, but the bottom line is that's what it is.
But just to be clear, you're claiming that buses full of voters who are not permitted to vote here, you're claiming that happens in New Hampshire?
I am claiming that is what Granite Staters tell me. And I am saying we need to respond to that.
Do you think you need to verify that information before you say?
I think we need to verify it. That's what I just said. Can you listen to me here for a second? I am saying that this is what Granite Staters are telling me, and I think it's valid. Okay. And I believe in it.
You think it's valid? Okay.
I think it's valid.
Okay, Senator, you praise the way New Hampshire administers elections, but you also have supported, some of the things that the general invoked, the For the People Act. That is a sweeping federal law that would require early voting, expand voting by mail. It would eliminate voter ID requirements, among many other things. But those provisions would override local election laws. So if New Hampshire's elections are well run in your estimation, why would the state be well served by those changes?
Well, first of all, New Hampshire does have some of the best elections in the country, and some of the provisions of that law make exceptions for small states like ours. Happy to follow up with you. But look, what you just heard from Don Bolduc is his continued attempt to stoke the big lie. He has traveled around this state for over a year now,
2 years.
stoking the big lie that 2020 was stolen. He has said he's been casting doubt on whether this election is something that he will accept by suggesting even last week that there would be big ballot dumps election night. He has said that as a senator, if the 2024 election doesn't go for his preferred candidate, he would work to overturn the election. Here's the thing about election deniers, right? He is working and has been working to conceal how extreme he is on everything from eliminating Social Security, enacting a nationwide abortion ban, and being
Right.
an
Let's just stick to election laws right
well,
now.
excuse me. I've listened to him talk about a lot of different issues, and here's the reason why having free and fair elections matters. It is because it is the way people in New Hampshire hold us accountable. Don Bolduc can ignore where most Granite Staters are on those issues that I just talked about, right? Because he thinks he doesn't need to accept election results. It means he doesn't think he is accountable, and he is promoting an agenda, Josh, that would raise people's costs. We haven't even talked about his proposal to do a 23% sales tax on
Okay,
everything,
let's just
including
let's just keep it to the
rent and
election right
health
now.
care, and eviscerate people's
Okay.
rights. That's why this is
All right,
relevant. That's why this
okay,
is
but
relevant.
I mean, we can hear it here. There
Okay.
obviously is a big partisan gap that is obvious when it comes to election laws. Republicans
Huge.
tend to focus on tightening laws in the name of guarding against fraud.
Yes.
Democrats prioritize making it easier to vote. What are specific ways you believe that there's common ground that could be reachable on these
Well,
issues?
I hope we can find common ground here. It has been very hard to do. Free and fair elections are the hallmark and foundation of our democracy. And when they are eroded because people think they can deny elections, or when they can undermine elections with partisans overturning election results, which is one of the things that the Freedom to Vote Act tries to address, then our democracy erodes and it gets very hard to get it back. So I have supported the Freedom to Vote Act that makes sure that we have, for instance, nonpartisan commissions to do redistricting.
Okay,
I think
time
that's
is getting
something
tight.
most,
Yeah, okay.
no. So I would think that the Republican Party would join with us on wanting nonpartisan redistricting. They have
Okay,
rejected that.
We're gonna,
Okay?
We're going to move
Yep.
on. I mean, it's got a related topic of government reform.
Okay. Yep.
I want to move on to talk about potential structural reforms to how things work in Washington. Let's start with the filibuster. Senator Hassan, last year you backed ending the Senate filibuster to make it easier to pass sweeping election overhaul bill that we've just been discussing. Are there other circumstances when you'd go around the filibuster, and why not just get rid of it entirely?
Look, the filibuster rule, which I think most viewers and listeners know about, is a rule that is intended to incentivize senators to come together and find that common ground that I've talked about. I'm proud of having been ranked the most bipartisan senator in the country because I've really focused on how you find common ground on any number of wide range of issues. Now, the problem with the filibuster, as it is currently used, is that it has gone from what we called the talking filibuster, when a senator who wanted to block legislation from being voted on had to take the Senate floor and explain to the country why they were blocking this legislation. It's now gotten to a point where a senator with the push of an email button can just block legislation.
So you'd be in favor of returning to that?
I have been in favor of returning it to a talking filibuster, right? I also think that there are some issues that are so fundamental to our democracy, like the right to vote or like a woman's right to make her own health care decisions, that we shouldn't allow a minority of the Senate to block those rights.
Thank you.
Thank you.
General Bolduc, same question to you. Do you see any circumstances in which you'd support doing away with the filibuster?
No, I do not.
Thank you. Senator Hassan, let's move to the courts. Do you think it's time to end lifetime appointments to federal courts?
I think, like many Granite Staters, I have been very concerned about the politicization of the United States Supreme Court, of justices who've been appointed saying that they would respect precedent, for instance, in the area of reproductive freedom, and then didn't. And I think that concerns all Americans. I have listened to a number of proposals, and one of the proposals that I think might make sense is to put a limit on years of service on the Supreme Court to justices, while they could still then serve in other federal benches, so that we could have a predictable rotation of justices.
What about term limits for senators and members of Congress?
I think voters can decide whether we are term limited, and I think it's really important for voters to have the choice to decide that they like what somebody's been doing and they want them to continue in service. They can also obviously vote us out of office.
I mean, General Bolduc already mentioned it, Senator, but you back getting rid of the Electoral College in the wake of the 2016 elections. Do you think that's a good thing that serves a small state like New Hampshire?
First of all, it would require a constitutional amendment,
No, I
and it is
understand,
very
but
unlikely to happen, right?
You favored it then.
So what my concern is an increasing kind of minority hold on popular elections. But let's be really clear. New Hampshire has 2 senators despite its size, right? New Hampshire will continue always to have the first in the nation primary, something I'm a vigorous advocate for. No, we have a law that says we'll go first, and we make better candidates and better presidents, and it's good for the country.
Okay, let's turn to the general on this. I mean, where are you? Where would you be on getting rid of the Electoral College? You think that's a good thing for New Hampshire?
I would never support that.
General Bolduc, I know you support term limits for members of Congress. Do you think there should be term limits for federal judges also?
I do not support the term limits for the Supreme Court. No, at this time I do not.
Do you think it's worth expanding the Supreme Court?
No, I do not.
Okay, move on.
All right, we're going to move on. I want to turn to some of this has been on display here today, but I want to turn to the kinds of campaigns you two have run in this race. Senator Hassan, for much of the past, several years, really, General Bolduc has been running a very public campaign, lots of open events, takes lots of questions from whoever shows up. Your approach has relied on a more tightly controlled approach where events are often effectively private. And I've heard you say many times that you believe we do democracy better in New Hampshire than anywhere else. How the campaign that you've chosen to run reflect that?
I'm out and about talking to Granite Staters all the time. I have lots of events at businesses where I sit down with employees, listen to their concerns. I shop at Market Basket. I go to Dunkin' Donuts. I hear a lot from Granite Staters, both positive and negative. Look, I think the real issue here is what my record reflects in terms of addressing the issues that Granite Staters prioritize. So it was Granite Staters who came to me and said they were paying hundreds and thousands of dollars in extra health care costs because of surprise medical billing. I teamed up with a Republican. We've now banned that nationwide, saving people on their health care costs. Granite Staters told me how much we need to fix our roads and bridges and to get high-speed internet to every community. So I teamed up with Republicans and Democrats. We negotiated the infrastructure law, and we have delivered.
So you don't think people should view this is a question about your campaign style, though. This is, you don't think that this is a reflection of politics of our time, but it's not as sort of free and open and we do it best in New Hampshire and we were always going to be first and everyone gets. It hasn't been that way.
Well, look, you are a political commentator. I am not. I run my campaign in a way that allows me to hear from Granite Staters and address their concerns in real time, both as a candidate and as a sitting United States Senator.
Okay, General, I want to turn to you. You obviously stress that you're a political outsider and you have today and all campaign long endeavored to deride Senator Hassan as a career politician. But, on plenty of issues, from accepting the results of the 2020 election to abortion to how you see the future of entitlement programs, your stances have been seemingly a little different depending on your audience, depending on who you're talking to. How is that a departure from the kind of politics as usual you say voters are frustrated with and want to end?
Look, here's the deal. I made it clear how I feel on abortion, right? And now I'm going to make it clear on how I feel on Social Security. I never said, ever did I say that I was going to terminate Social Security. I will protect it, and I will make sure that it endures, and I will do what I will make sure that it doesn't get stolen from, like they have stolen from it. And I will protect Medicare, and I will make it easier, and I will make it more affordable. I will get rid of the donut hole, which, you know what that is, right? If you're in Medicare, you know what it is, because I hear from a lot of Granite Staters. The more care you need, the more expensive it gets.
But
this is the problem, okay, right? And so the more people that you talk to, the more experience you get and the more ideas that you get and the more views that you need to internalize. So it's not changing for audience sake. It's changing because that's what I'm supposed to be: accountable, responsible, transparent, trustful, tell the truth, admit when I'm wrong. And I've admitted that I got it wrong on the 2020 election. She hasn't admitted that she was a 2016 election denier, but she was. So that's the difference. Fundamental difference is I account, right? She does not. I believe we have integrity issues in our elections. She denies it and wants to federalize it and make it more problematic. See, I am out there talking to people. I am a Granite Stater. I came from this state. I was born and raised in this state. I worked the ground in this state as a farmer, as a police officer, served 33 and a half years for this country, lost 72 service members in
Senator,
battle. This is my approach. No, it's my approach. As a general officer, I worked for people. I did not
Okay, we're
make
going to
them
give,
work for me,
Senator Hassan a chance to
which is what
respond
she's
to
doing.
what
Yeah.
you said.
And then give me a chance.
So
I wish we had more time.
look, people can watch videos for themselves at bolducfacts.com.
Which is
When-
her website.
Well,
Come on.
It has videos
on.
of General Bolduc talking.
That have been tampered with.
Please stop
Oh my
interrupting.
goodness! So let's.
I'm just
let's, I think what's happened here is that Don Bolduc, whose views are very extreme and very out of step with Granite Staters, has discovered that. And so he works to conceal it from people, as he has throughout this debate today. He has said that he wants to get rid of the Social Security program. Just a few weeks ago, saying on camera to a news reporter, it's been around since 1935. It's time for a change. He has said that privatizing Medicare and making at least $1 trillion of cuts to it is a priority of his. That's on video, too. He has supported a 23% sales tax on rent, health care, everything else, and he doesn't want people to know about it because he knows it's not something Granite Staters
What do you
would
mean
support.
by the 20%?
Yeah,
What do you
really,
mean
I'd
by
like
that?
to know, too.
He supports something called the Fair Tax Program, and that is a 23% sales tax, regardless of your income, on everything you purchase, including rental and health care. He has supported that
All right, we're going to
throughout
move
his
on, but
time in
is the
office.
fair tax something I'm...
No, I never said that.
He-
And if I
you-
did,
you just-
you'd have it written down in your
well,
notes.
He just supported it on Facebook Live this week with Adam Sexton, okay? So let's just talk about what's really happening here, which is
supported
now.
Okay, we're gonna
now,
move-
our
I
tax
think,
code.
We're sort of
Amanda, you
spinning out of
wanted to talk
control.
about government,
Well, I think we're going to
government-
move to environmental
Okay,
regulation,
okay.
but
So-
Amanda's
Good.
got some...
Yeah.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, we're going to start with you, General Bolduc. You've talked about your own exposure to chemicals and drinking nasty water during your time in the military. What role should the government play in regulating PFAS and other chemicals that can be harmful to human health?
Well, I think it's obvious, right? They should make sure that corporations don't do it. And I think our state should be the ones in charge of that. And I think they will do it very, very effectively. And I think that at the federal level, we need to give block grants to fire departments and others to buy new equipment so that they can be safe from their equipment that's made with PFAS, and they can be safe from all these chemicals. That's what we should be doing. We should be making sure at the federal level that they can do this, and we let the states make sure that the water and the air and everything is clean. Under her model, the federal government does it all, and it's a wasteful model. It costs us more money, and the regulations are different. It's more strict here. It's less strict at the federal level. But the companies will default to the federal level because they can, and that's wrong, and that's what we should do. The environment is important to me, right? And she's going to talk about the PACT Act, right? And I think that's a great act. But there's only 50,000 people waiting, and it's not funded, and the VA doesn't even know how they're going to implement it. That's the problems we have when the federal government does things in a bureaucratic way and then pats themselves on the back for thinking they're solving a problem when they're creating more problems. That's the problem.
Senator Hassan, we want to give you a chance to respond to that.
Well, so look, I hear about environmental concerns from Granite Staters all the time. especially when it comes to PFAS contamination of our drinking water. Contamination we've seen obviously around the Pease Air Force Base and also over in Merrimack, and we see it in other parts of the state as well. It's why in the bipartisan infrastructure bill, we allotted a specific amount of money nationally, $2 billion, I think it was, it may have been more, for decontamination of PFAS sites. And New Hampshire is seeing some of that money come to it right now. Now, that's a bill that Don Bolduc says he would have voted against. We know that the EPA has now defined PFAS as a hazardous substance. That will help us get more resources to that cleanup. And yes, we do need to continue to work with fire departments and first responders to help them with new equipment and ultimately get a new kind of firefighting foam that doesn't have PFAS in it.
All right, we're really running out of time here, but quickly, 10 seconds each. I know this is a tough one, but depending on who, regardless of who wins, like how would you, if you get reelected, Senator, how would you work to reach out to people who didn't vote for you? Obviously, there are great divides in this country.
I always look forward to talking with Granite Staters, and I will continue to travel around, do forums as I have been, chambers of commerce, talking with people everywhere I go.
Okay, what about you, General?
I've done 60 town halls. I invite everybody to those town halls, and everybody comes, Democrats, Independents, Libertarians, Free Staters. I welcome the challenge. I welcome the questions. You will be treated with respect, and I will make sure that I listen and learn from you.
Okay, I can hear the music swell. That concludes our debate today. I want to thank both of you, Senator Hassan, General Bolduc, for taking part. Thank you to New Hampshire PBS. Thank you for Amanda for being here to ask questions. We're going to be debating tomorrow at noon for the candidates for the 2nd Congressional District. For now, I'm Josh Rogers with Amanda Goki. Thank you very much for joining us today on NHPR.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
This has been a New Hampshire Elections special presentation. The New Hampshire Candidate Debates 2022, in collaboration with New Hampshire Public Radio, New Hampshire PBS, and New Hampshire Bulletin. Production support is provided by the Business and Industry Association of New Hampshire.